Is it your statement that the number of ballots exceeds the number of registered voters in Arizona, yes or no?
In some places, I would imagine that might be the case.
Show me where in Arizona the number of ballots exceeds the number of registered voters now.
I'm gonna just barge in here.
No, who are you? I didn't agree to have a conversation.
I'm an Arizona voter, by the way.
You should get the out. I'm talking to this guy.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Are you sure or are you not sure?
Yeah, I would say I lean more towards yeah.
You are sure. Okay, then it should be no problem for you to produce the evidence of the number of registered voters being exceeded by the number of ballots cast.
No, it's called intuition, man.
You feel that you don't need to provide evidence. It's just your intuition.
Correct.
Hey, folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to read what's going on from a pro-republic, anti-corruption, and anti-oligarch perspective, subscribe to The Weekly Patriot. The link is in the description.
So let's just start with like the insurrection stuff first. So you're of the opinion that there was an insurrection. Is that correct?
Yes, I am definitely of that opinion, but I think we need to start even earlier than that. You started by like a kind of a broader statement, which I think feeds into the question of insurrection and might ultimately determine the course of this conversation, and that is that elections in the United States are broadly illegitimate. Is that a fair characterization of your view?
As of 2020, yes.
As of 2020, yes. So it is your opinion that there's evidence that shows that Donald Trump was the rightful winner of the 2020 election?
No, because the election departments were threatened to be sued by Mark Elias, the top legal mind of the Democratic Party. Nobody has seen these ballots. Nobody has seen the information. There has been no meaningful audit of this process whatsoever, which is a rallying cry for the Democratic Party or the modern left. After the victory of Trump in 2016, one of the primary rallying calls from the left was, we need transparency in elections. We need electoral transparency, which I wholeheartedly agree with. There was no closure for the modern left after the 2016 victory of Donald Trump.
When you say there was no closure, what do you mean by no closure?
Well, Madame Clinton has not conceded to her defeat. She has repeatedly disputed the victory of President Trump. She says that he's an illegitimate leader. The election was bullshit. I mean, I know I'm generalizing here, but she does not. She disagrees with the outcome of the election. She disputes the fact that President Trump rightfully won that election.
And you, of course, relate to her, right? I mean, you relate to her and you think that she has a point because there was no closure?
No, I don't. No, I do not. I cannot relate to her merely because, for those who don't know, Hillary Clinton used the Green Party, I believe it was Jill Stein, to do some sort of audit, I believe in Michigan, specifically Detroit.
How sure are you of that?
I'm almost certain.
Would it surprise
because what
you
they
to
found
know
was
that Hillary Clinton opposed that lawsuit? Would that surprise you?
Well, she says that now because they were finding irregularities. They were finding irregularities in the process.
Would it surprise you if Hillary Clinton was at least formally against that lawsuit?
No, it doesn't surprise me because I'm aware of her public position, but there was an attempt.
So how do you know that Jill Stein is connected to Hillary Clinton, that Hillary Clinton managed and promoted Jill Stein's election challenges?
Well, call it a hunch. Call it intuition.
Do you have evidence of that?
I don't have concrete proof.
Okay.
I don't have concrete proof.
I'll eliminate. I think it's fair for me to eliminate things for which you do not have proof for. Is that fair of me to do?
That's fair, but okay. I'm just letting the people know where I'm coming from.
Well, why are you coming from a place where you don't have proof of?
What do you mean?
Why would you start by speaking about Hillary Clinton's efforts with respect to Jill Stein's lawsuits in various states if you don't have evidence that she did that?
Well, it stands to reason that an individual like Hillary Clinton, who disputes and rejects the outcome of the 2016 election, I mean, this is her feelings.
She didn't file any lawsuits.
Yeah, but that's besides the point. Now there's an opportunity, conveniently coming from Jill Stein's camp, to contest this election and to uncover what transpired.
How did she connect it to it? She can't control Jill Stein if she files a lawsuit.
I'm letting you know. It's just it's intuition. You know, it doesn't stand to does it make any sense that she's openly rejecting the outcome of the 2016 election, and now there's this other individual contesting the results of the election, trying to get to the bottom of what transpired in 2016. And conveniently, she just openly rejects that.
So
No, I
number
believe
one
she
is
put them up to it.
There's nothing entailed by being publicly and avowedly against an election and signing on to a particular election. There could be different reasons why one might sign up to one challenge and not the other. Second, your premise is just fundamentally wrong this entire time, which is that Hillary Clinton, so far as the voting and the counting of votes is concerned, she did not reject the results of the election and conceded the next day.
She did, but after the fact, much like President Trump, he rejected the outcome in 2020, and he still continues to, but he also conceded when appropriate.
So to be clear, you do not have any evidence that Hillary Clinton promoted, agreed to, suggested, or in any way affected the decision for Jill Stein to file a lawsuit, but it's your intuition.
It's my intuition, yeah.
Okay. Do you think that that's like something I should be weighing heavily, that, oh, this guy's intuition, which you can't back up with evidence of any kind, should be influencing me and how I don't know, determine the closure or non-closure of the 2016 election?
Yeah, that's fair. Again, we can agree to disagree. Again, your assertion about what transpired on J6, I don't even know your opinion on the 2016 election. I mean, we can agree to disagree.
Well, don't you think Trump won the 2016 election?
I do. I believe he won it.
Why do you think Trump won it? You said all elections are run illegitimately in the country.
Well, I said as of 2020.
So I'm sorry. Every election that you know of prior to 2020 was run fairly.
No, I don't know that for a fact.
You have no reason to
assuming
think
that
any election. The case. Okay, so here we go. You have no reason to assume any election other than 2020 was run unfairly.
For now, yeah.
Okay. So why did you bring up the 2016 election as anything?
Well, we need to. I'm going to tie this all together.
Okay.
There was. I'm a registered Democrat, for those who don't know, and I've been involved in politics for a long time, and I've been interested in politics for a long time. And there is a long-standing tradition among the Democratic Party to reject the outcomes of election. We saw this in the year 2000. I believe there was a little bit of grumbling in 2004, and certainly after 2016. And at that point in time, everybody, at least American, was really getting into, the meat and potatoes of how these elections, transpire, how they're conducted, et cetera, et cetera. But prior to that, everybody was kind of asleep at the wheel, and they just assumed, everything was hunky dory. But there's a lot of vulnerabilities in the process, as we saw in 2020.
But you don't question any election prior to 2020. Is that a correct statement of your opinion?
No, there's certainly a few that, that there's probably issues with.
Like which? Could you name any others?
Yeah, Grover Cleveland. After his first run, he is of the opinion that he won legitimately. And
what is your evidence to suggest that you're talking about Grover Cleveland's second election or his first?
The second, because he won
the
first one, but he lost the second one.
Okay, so what evidence do you have to question the results of Grover Cleveland's second election?
Well, I don't have the materials ahead of me. Like I said, there was no prep here. There was no prep here. Yeah,
but it sounds like just to be clear, it's a little bit picking and choosing. Like you say, you don't question the 2016 election, but why should we have confidence in that one as opposed to any other election? But you do believe that Trump won 2016, so I just don't understand why are you confident
but a lot of people
won?
reject the outcome.
I'm asking about
of the 2016
you.
Election.
I don't really care. There could be crazy people who contest elections, and it could even be the case that Hillary Clinton deep down thinks something, or there's a quote somewhere that you surprised me on. I doubt it. But regardless, I'm asking solely about your beliefs. You trust the 2016 election. Why do you trust the 2016 election?
That's an excellent question. Well, it's his victory was a civilization changing event. I was able to witness the campaign that was conducted. I wasn't a part of it. And again, there was just no credible evidence that was brought forth after the fact that the election was hacked by the Russians, which is a claim made by the modern left,
the
establishment party.
Yeah.
They said that it was rigged for sure, hacked, rigged, or that the Russian government somehow interfered in it on behalf of President Trump. Again, there's no
that makes a
evidence
lot
for
of
any
sense.
of these claims.
To me, that explanation makes a ton of sense. So what you basically said was, this was a like civilization changing election, and of all the claims that were promoted by conspiracy theorists, none of them had substantial evidence behind them. Don't you think that's like
Correct.
I think that's a pretty good standard to decide whether or not we choose to believe an election is fair or not. If there is no significant evidence that shows that there was any malfeasance, then we have no reason to believe it was flawed, and we're going to accept it. Do you accept that framework?
Yeah, certainly. However, I can be sympathetic towards members of the modern left, members of the Democratic Party that reject the claim. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary
I
evidence.
totally
So
agree.
if I'm led to believe that the Russians interfered in the election, where are the receipts? 2016 was a long time ago. We're in 2024. No tangible, concrete evidence has been produced to suggest otherwise.
I totally agree.
No
I think
real-
that's actually really smart, and it's a good point to make, that if the
Absolutely.
Democrats had excellent evidence that like the Russians hacked election machines or some shit, or whatever the crazy shit that they were saying
Yeah.
on MSNBC, we would expect to see proof of it, and they were totally empty-handed.
Yeah, throughout the entire way. And what we saw was lawfare launched against President Trump's administration, thwarting his ability to really govern effectively. If you want to make the argument that he was robbed of his opportunity to govern effectively, people can make that claim. And, this stuff is important. And again, like my personal philosophy about governments is, one, I don't trust governments. And my worldview suggests that the government is always guilty. So if the government is making a claim, they need to be able to prove that claim. So if the government, I'm just speaking broadly here,
Sure.
is claiming that President Trump won the 2016 election, well, they need to be able to prove it. I think that's really important. People need to be able to look at the ballots. People need to be able to look at the machines. People need to be able to be clued in on how this process works and transpires. Apparently, a lot of people didn't, and there were
Can I ask a
individuals
clarifying
who were
question here
trying
about
to.
burdens?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you just
sure.
said something that I think makes sense, is like, if you make a claim, you have to be able to prove it. Don't you think in
Correct.
2016 that the burden of proof was on like Jill Stein or a Democrat? And if you
Well,
want
it was on Hillary Clinton.
yeah, the
It was
burden of
really
proof
Hillary
is on
Clinton.
her, right? It's not on like us to disprove the existence of fraud in 2016, right?
Sure.
Okay. So you agree, and tell me if you disagree with this standard. Like, standards are smart because if you have a standard, we can apply it like to different situations and be consistent in our analysis. So as a general standard for assessing whether an election was run fairly, don't you think a good standard might be, if a challenger is able to provide substantial evidence of voter fraud, or some other kind of defect in the election, then we can. Oh, I don't know if you're. I see myself twice. Oh, you're.
Yeah.
showing
Do you
your,
mind
No,
if
I
I
don't.
throw you
I
up on
don't
the
mind.
mini display?
That's
Sweet,
fine.
cool.
So I'm going to repeat myself. So a standard might be like, if you're able to produce substantial and good evidence that there's a defect in the election, maybe then we can say that there are in fact defects. But if you're unable to provide convincing and substantial proof of election integrity issues or defects, then our assumption maybe should be that the election was conducted fair. You think that's a good rule, a general rule? And the burden
Yeah,
of proof is on the
probably.
person claiming the impropriety, who has to prove the claim.
Yes.
Okay.
However, elections are very, very unique because of the way that the process folds out throughout multiple states. And I mean, goodness, I don't even know where to begin because this issue is so complex. And like, again, there were irregularities in virtually all of the swing states. And
In
I'm
2020,
going to include Nevada, in 2020, and I'm going to include Nevada and Arizona in that process. And one of the major, turning point for President Trump, because he was on track to win that election, was the introduction of mail-in ballots. And when you introduce, or if you change the process, it needs to go through appropriate channels. The state legislature is in charge of the way that elections are conducted throughout the states. The state legislature, for the most part, was not really involved in this process. You had justices and government clerks that were basically creating, new rules out of whole cloth.
all right,
and that is a
can
problem.
we take that one claim? I think that's a really good claim to start on. Okay. So, for example, in Arizona, you believe the introduction of mail-in ballots in 2020 was a huge problem. That the majority of people in 2020 use mail-in ballots.
Yeah, it's a major problem because
okay,
you have
that's fine.
Yeah,
Let's take that.
yeah.
Are you aware that Arizona has been doing mostly mail-in ballots for years now? before 2020.
What do you mean mostly mail-in ballots?
That Arizona like spearheaded a major initiative years before 2020 to do the majority of votes by mail-in ballots.
What year?
Are you aware of that or not?
I don't know if that may or may not be the case, but the primary mode of voting throughout the country is in person.
But we're talking about states, right? You said they're different in how the states are set up, and so
yeah, and that would include Arizona.
Yeah, so it would include Arizona, and so in Arizona, you would agree, wouldn't you, that if one of the primary means of voting was mail-in ballots for years,
it wasn't. It was in person.
How sure are you of that?
I'm almost certain.
Okay, so if I could show you that a majority of voters prior to 2020 used mail-in voting, would that alleviate any of your concerns?
Not necessarily, because Arizona was not the only state where this is a problem. And even then, the underlying contention that I have with, hey, what's going on? Thank you for joining, but hang tight. But the underlying issue that I have is the lack of transparency, which is what everybody demands. There's zero transparency in this process. We don't know who's voting. We don't know if the ballots are valid to begin with. And the only state that was able to conduct a somewhat kind of meaningful audit of this process was in Arizona, where we saw ballots.
You're not concerned with Arizona because there were tons of audits in Arizona. There was one conducted by the
that's why Arizona is concerning.
Wait, why is Arizona concerning if there was separate multiple audits of the Arizona election results, including one
because
by
they found
cyber
irregularities.
Ninjas?
Because they found irregularities.
Can you say more about what irregularities did they find in Arizona?
Well, for example, there were a handful of these ballots, to the tune of almost 20,000 that didn't have legitimate signatures. They did not have legitimate signatures on the ballots. They either had like a stamp of approval or just a line through it. And in some cases, there was text printed on it, which is none of those are legitimate signatures. A bank would not accept that on a check. Casinos don't accept those when, you're cashing out a jackpot voucher. And election departments, for the most part, at least out here in Nevada, they will be, because I vote in person and I signed my ballot. My signature isn't always exactly the same. And they were giving me a hard time about voting in person. Luckily I had my ID. I produced my ID and I was able to show them, like, I am who I am. I know my signature doesn't match. And one of the polling site leaders had to okay me to go and proceed to vote, which is new to me. But yeah, the problem with a lot of these ballots is that the signatures were not valid, and they have to be reviewed, and they have to be open to the public so the public can scrutinize these documents. I believe it is our right to do that.
Are you aware who the county recorder of Maricopa County is in Arizona?
Yeah, Mr. Richter.
And he's voting for Biden.
Do you have any reason to disbelieve his answers to your concerns that actually signatures
absolutely.
were checked? I mean, what do you have as a reason to doubt his conclusions?
Well, the public does not have access to them. And again, to the ballots, to the information. Like, auditing is a very simple process. It's kind of like accounting, because I do that on the side. When you have a bank statement and you have a ledger, the totals for both of these documents should match. And if they don't, you're basically trying to determine why they're different. That's called reconciliation. Auditing a ballot, auditing a vote for a contest is really no different. So if you have, let's say, 1,000 registered voters, but you have 2,000 ballots, why is there that discrepancy?
Is it your statement that the number of ballots exceeds the number of registered voters in Arizona? Yes or no?
In some places, I would imagine that might be the case.
Show me where in Arizona the number of ballots exceeds the number of registered voters now.
I'm gonna just barge in here.
No, who are you? I didn't agree to have a conversation.
I'm an Arizona voter, by the way.
You should get the out. I'm talking to this guy.
Whoa, everybody calm down. Spencer, can you hold on a minute? Because we're having a discussion, man.
All right.
Yeah, no,
I appreciate
it. I appreciate it, buddy. But no, I said it. I said probably. I don't. Again,
Are you sure or are you not sure that voters exceeded the number of registrants in Arizona?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Are you sure or are you not sure?
I would lean more towards sure. I'm a gambling man. I would bet.
I'm either sure of something or I'm not sure of it. Are you sure?
Yeah, I would say I lean more towards yeah.
You are sure. Okay, then it should be no problem for you to produce the evidence of the number of registered voters being exceeded by the number of ballots cast. That shouldn't be an issue for you if you're sure.
That does happen. And again, we have an issue of transparency here because Mr. Richter is not really into the whole transparency
What
thing.
evidence would it take to disprove the allegation that the number of voters exceeded the number of registrants?
I would need to look at the voter rolls and I would need to see the ballots.
So if I produce
on hand,
if I produce you something from Maricopa County that says that what you're saying is wrong, would you take that as evidence that that is wrong?
Depends what you're going to produce. Depends what you.
If I were to show you the number of voter rolls and the number, the size of the number of registrants,
you do realize those voter rolls are not accurate. Like you do realize that.
Okay,
right?
Whether they're accurate or not, you made a claim. Your claim was that the number of ballots exceeded the number of registered voters. Was that or was that not your claim? Sorry, was that or was that not your claim?
I said it was probably true.
So wait, was it your claim that the number of registered voters was exceeded by the number of actual votes cast?
It's not what I said.
Okay, so is it or is it not your belief that the number of voters exceeded the number of registered voters?
I said it's possible, man.
It's possible now? I thought you were very sure. Are you sure? Not sure? Possible? What is it?
I'm pretty positive. Like I said, I'm willing to bet on it. I'm willing to bet fat cash that is the case. None of these election departments they'll all fold under legitimate scrutiny. Again, I don't have that information because I don't work for Maricopa County.
So you don't know, right? You don't actually know if it exceeded the number of registered voters.
No, it's called intuition, man.
Just like with Jill Stein, intuition, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't need to. You feel that you don't need to provide evidence of the number of registered voters being exceeded by the number of voters. It's just your intuition.
Correct. Yeah. Because I am a concerned citizen who is upset at the way that these elections have been conducted since the year 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
There's
since the
glaring
year
issues
2020,
with
not since the year 2016, not since the year 2012.
Correct.
Your intuition is
that Arizona has had unique issues.
Oh,
speaking, yes, they had
like
keeping
such as the number of
off the
actual
ballot.
voters. Issues such as the number of voters exceeding the number of registered voters. That's
okay.
That
it
kind
wasn't
of
a definitive. It wasn't a definitive claim. I don't want to get hung up on this.
What kind of claim was it? Was it a vibes claim? Was it an intuition claim? Was
sure,
it a claim
we'll call it a vibes claim for simplicity's sake.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one because I don't really take seriously your vibes claims. I think they're more bullshit claims than vibes claims.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy, I'm just going to jump in and just say you really need to look at the trial. I know you're a lawyer and all that, or is that what you claim to be?
What do you mean the trial? What's the trial?
The Kerry Lake trials, where they've brought evidence to the courts about issues with the process that Maricopa County has. And as an impacted voter in Maricopa County who had to wait 2 hours in line, do you think that's good for our elections? Do you think that's good for our democracy?
I'm the one who's in favor of expanding voting methods. I'm the one who's in favor of mail-in voting and making it longer. And so are the Democrats in favor of expanding the amount of voting that occurs, even if it incurs additional costs. And so I'm not really going to take seriously your concerns about the
So why not go to a precinct model? Why not go to a precinct model? Why did Maricopa County change to a vote center model where Anthem, this is one of the locations that failed massively, all those people went to all the other voting centers and it had major, super long lines. We know about the 20-inch ballot, which was printed 19 inches. So you're telling me that Maricopa County's elections were perfect? Because if it's Maricopa County and I forget the county that Tucson is, that are the main drivers for the state because they're the most populous, right? Fair to say?
I'm not saying that the election was run perfectly, but the burden of proof, wouldn't you agree, sir, is on the person asserting fraud, correct?
I'm pretty sure it's already been proved.
Would you or would you not agree with the burden of proof being on the person alleging fraud?
It's not the law. That's not the law.
Sorry. Would you or would you not agree that the burden of proof is on the person alleging fraud?
The law states in Arizona. You can correct me. I'm answering you for Arizona. Yeah. I'm answering for Arizona. The way, if I understand the statute correctly, is if there is an improprietary, or whatever the word is, that makes it to where the election is in question, then it can be overturned, and it has happened here in Arizona before. You should actually go and listen to my interview with Senator Whitney
What was my
Rogers
question?
on that.
I don't give a fuck about your interview. What was your question? What was my question? Sorry.
I
Do you remember my question?
remember.
So my
I
question
don't.
was, who is the burden of proof to demonstrate fraud? Is the burden of proof on the person alleging it or on the state running the election?
What do you
I'll answer
define
that.
as
Spencer,
fraud?
Stop. Spencer, stop. I don't want to dogpile. I don't want to dogpile. please.
Dogpile. I'm outnumbered.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to do that. So Spencer, like I get it. You're from Arizona. Okay, he muted his mic. Yeah, no, I appreciate
Cool.
it. I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. The way that this server works is that I allow people who have the guest role to always come in. So you're always welcome, Pisco. You're always welcome to come in.
Thanks, man.
And disagree with my political worldview if you'd like. Again, guys, my friends who are watching, please do not interrupt, and let's not be disrespectful because this is between me and him. This is our discussion.
And my bad.
I'm not okay with dogpiling.
No,
Everybody cool it. Everybody cool
a little
it.
backstory. Gio messaged me the other day asking if I wanted to join the show, so that's why I jumped in.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah, but to answer your question, whose burden is it? In regards to government matters, the government is always guilty. They need to be able to ease people's fears and concerns regarding any process whatsoever. So when people have issues with transparency and people have issues with the way that the process unfolded, or they question the results, they need to be able to prove that the election was on the up and up, that protocol was followed. And again, we're not really getting that. And I would just like to say really quick, if what happened in Arizona occurred in Fulton County in Georgia, the FBI would be there immediately, arresting people, taking names, and ensuring that the polls stay open for as long as they need, so the voters are not disenfranchised. We saw disenfranchisement in Arizona.
How did you see disenfranchisement?
There were people waiting in line for many, many hours.
That's disenfranchisement.
Unable to vote because Maricopa did something to the machines, or the machines failed gravely, which doesn't make a lot of sense because Mr. Richter suggested that they tested them, that they were calibrated properly, that everything was supposed to work, and how everything fell apart is a complete and total mystery to them.
So you think waiting in line extra because of technical difficulties is, quote, disenfranchisement?
Yes. If this were to happen in Fulton County, the outcome of that election would be vastly different.
Are you aware there were lines? Wait, are you aware there were lines in Fulton County?
Were people waiting for,
I don't know the number.
4 or 5 hours?
I don't know what your cutoff is for disenfranchisement. If it's an hour, 2 hours,
well,
3
what
hours.
Would you think?
I think
how acceptable is it that somebody should wait in line to vote?
I think that there's definitely a question if you're waiting 3, 4, 5 hours, if you're removed and you're not given an ability to cast provisional ballots. I think you may have a good point that there's an amount of inconvenience that you could impose upon a voter that would effectively disenfranchise them. That is not what we're seeing in the 2020 election at all. And furthermore, to the extent that there is problems or waits or delays or that thing, I'm totally against that. That's why I'm in favor of mail-in voting. That's why I'm in favor of expanding the amount of voting centers and drop-in mail-in boxes. That's why in Wisconsin, I thought it was ridiculous for Trump and others to challenge the Wisconsin drop-in system. So all of this is bullshit delays made by Republicans, not by Democrats.
Do you know why those mail-in drop boxes were contested?
I know exactly why they were contested. Yeah.
Why were they contested?
Yes.
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 Wait,
are you challenging me? You think I haven't kept up with the Wisconsin Supreme Court briefing on this issue specifically, as well as democracy in the park and others? You think you're going to
I'm asking you.
Do you think
you
know more? Do you think you know more about how the election was run in Wisconsin than I do?
Probably. Let me.
Okay.
I want to ask you fairly. I want to ask you fairly. In your own words, why do you think those specific mail-in those mailboxes, those ballot drop boxes were kosher, and why were they contested? In your own words,
they were contested because in Wisconsin the law refers to sending it to the clerk, and the way that the Trump people were advocating the interpretation of that law that allows for certain voting centers is that it would have to be given directly to the clerk as opposed to giving it to someone who gives it to the clerk. And so the issue is a statutory interpretation issue about whether or not those mailboxes qualified under the statute for the kind of allowable drop boxes. It was initially in favor of Trump after I think the ruling came out in like 2022, but recently it's been reversed, and so that's where we are.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Okay,
But
like,
there's a
that's
little
the
bit more
issue.
to it
Yeah.
than that, though.
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
you
there
familiar
are
with
other issues. There was democracy in the park. That quote unquote issue. These are all bullshit. They're all marginal. Doesn't affect the outcome of the election, and so
That is not true.
It's not
That is
helpful.
not true. Even if
Yeah.
there's a slight disparate impact on the outcome of the election, it's unfair and it shouldn't be. And it shouldn't.
So you're
stand.
saying if
Let me just ask-
5
wait, are you
votes,
familiar-
if 5 votes were cast in an improper way and the margin of victory is 20,000, you think the election should be thrown out?
If it's not fair, if people are disenfranchised, we got to do
Can
it
I get
again.
a yes
The
or
process
no
needs
to
be
that
fair.
question? I asked you a question.
I'm gonna say no.
Oh, okay.
No, because I'm pro fairness
All right,
and
so
I'm
then-
pro
then
complete
we agree.
transparency. But wait, there's a big part of the drop boxes that you completely omitted. Mark Zuckerberg was funding a good bulk, or maybe all of these drop boxes, and they were strategically placed in areas of Wisconsin that would be favorable to the Democratic Party, and areas that were not were disenfranchised because they didn't have access to these. That's a fact too. Are you familiar with the Zuckerbucks is what they call them? That's what
I've heard of
kids
him.
say. Yeah. Well, there was oh my goodness, like I said, I should have prepared for this. There's been a move, I believe, in Wisconsin and elsewhere to they call it ban Zuckerbucks, because Mark Zuckerberg and a handful of a handful of these other billionaires, they were interfering in the process. They were actively, literally involved in the process. Like I said, disenfranchising a handful of voters. I'm just gonna philosophically, I disagree with expanding this process. I think voting should be done in person. All contests
Make
should
up
be
your mind, dude.
100%
You're like complaining about long lines in in-person voting centers, and then you're saying it should all be done that way, thereby increasing the number of lines. You can't decide on a theory of disenfranchisement that you want to keep, and so you want to throw everything in the wall until it sticks, even know, though they're counterintuitive and counteracting each other.
No, not necessarily. I mean, just because it's going to be done in person, or I believe it should be done in person, doesn't mean that the process needs to be onerous or burdensome on the voter. I mean, you can still have machines and make the process streamlined and open up, more voting centers, allow more voting centers to exist in more places.
That was true of 2016. That was true of 2016 as well. Everything you're saying was true of 2016.
What do you mean?
The thing about the voting centers, the thing about there being lines, delays in certain, that happens in almost every single election, including the 2016 election.
Yeah.
But you don't question the 2016 election. And there's a reason for that, because you like the outcome.
No, not necessarily. That's not.
Then explain the difference in
it.
all the procedural issues you're talking about vis-a-vis 2020.
First off, the delays that you speak of prior to 2020, again, you have to be more specific. I mean, yeah, sometimes machines are not calibrated properly. Sometimes the power goes out. Sometimes poll workers don't show up, and there are delays and there are issues. But all of that can be easily remedied one way or another.
Easily.
Now we're at a point where, voting access is expanded to the point of absurdity, where anybody can receive a ballot, anybody can sign these ballots, and nobody is verifying them. And there are very powerful forces at play here that are doing their best to prevent any sort of electoral transparency, which is what the Democrat Party initially called for, which I do agree with, but they say one thing, but they're doing another.
I have a question for you.
That is a massive problem.
Do you believe that the Jewish people are responsible for election problems in the 2020 election?
Dude, I have no idea.
Do you believe that?
I have no idea.
Do you believe there's a good chance that Jews were responsible for the problems in the 2020 election?
Why would I think that? Why?
I'm asking you. You can reject it. You can reject it, or you can accept it. Do you believe that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know who was responsible for the process changing as dramatically as it did. There were a lot of people involved. I don't know the religion. I don't know the gender, dude.
Do you think that there's a decent point? Yeah, because I think that you're running in some of these conspiracies that have no basis other than your vibes, and you're kind of using certain phrases that indicate to me that there may be a inclination, or let's call it an intuition, as you stated, that Jews may be responsible. And I don't hear you denying that that is a belief of yours.
Dude, I don't know. You want me to make a definitive claim about something that I do not know. And this is the underlying problem with the elections, is that there's zero transparency. This isn't a conspiracy to suggest that, dude. Like when we have elections that are not called, that are called within, weeks after the contest is concluded, that's a problem.
Weeks.
That's
You
a
said,
major problem.
You said weeks. How long did it take for the election to be called in 2020? Was
Officially,
it even a week?
It took a long time. It took a long time to count ballots. It took a long time to count these mail-in ballots, and people were not entirely sure. I know the regime media said one thing, but the reality was, no one really knew.
No one really knew. So, isn't this lack of transparency also an issue in 2016?
Not necessarily. There was no meaningful effort to prevent people from discussing what they wanted to in 2016. There was no meaningful roadblock for anybody who wanted to contest the election of 2016. That happened after the fact through lawfare, through illegitimate spying on the president, and through.
When was the illegitimate spying of the president?
Really?
You're talking about 2016 and 17 and the FISA warrants?
Yeah.
Okay.
Those are bullshit.
So you're not.
There's no reason to
that
do
was
that.
all
There was
in the
zero
wake.
reason to spy on the
that was
president.
all in the wake of 2016, right?
Correct.
But that was also prior to 2016. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah.
So you're aware.
Again,
so I just want to. I
that's
just
even
want to be
worse.
clear.
That's even worse, by the
When
way.
do you think the first FISA warrant was issued on Carter Page?
It was probably prior. If I
Prior
remember
to the
correctly.
2016 election, is that right?
Yeah. So
it's
now
so
the
it's your
regime is
agreement.
illegitimately
It's
spying
your
on private
agreement.
citizens.
It's your agreement. Therefore, that everything related to the illegal spying that you characterize as a new issue in the 2020 election, that was also true before 2016. Isn't that correct? Yes or no?
Wait, repeat that one more time.
If it's true that prior to the 2016 election, FISA warrants were issued against Carter Page, just like after it, isn't it the case that that is not a basis to distinguish results in the 2016 election to the 2020 election?
Well, I'll just make an underline.
Is that a yes or a no? I don't hear you answering the question.
Sure, I'll say yeah.
Okay, it's not a proper way to distinguish 2016 and 2020. Fair?
Sure, I'll give you that.
Okay, so then let's put that aside. How are you going to distinguish 2016 and 2020 in terms of the lack of transparency? And especially considering the fact that there were more audits in 2020. The fact that there are more lawsuits in 2020.
There were not more audits
Of course there was.
Besides
what are you
Arizona,
talking
name
about?
one. Besides Arizona, name one.
So there were audits in Georgia as well.
Are you sure?
100%.
So they verified the signatures. They scrutinized the voter rolls.
So you
understand.
You understand that where they accept mail-in ballots in most of these swing states, at the very least, you have to check the signature. Signature verification is required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because you have to do it doesn't mean that they did.
Okay, do you have evidence they didn't? Or
they don't have evidence.
Is it just your intuition, or do you have evidence?
They did not prove adequately that they.
Do you
did a
have
meaningful audit of
evidence
the
that
ballot.
they did not check signatures? Yes or no?
The burden of proof is not on me.
So the burden of
the
on
government is
me-
making a claim
okay.
that Joe Biden ended up winning that contest, but they are not producing the evidence that he did so.
So it's
That
up,
is a
it's up to
problem,
the
dude.
government to prove that everyone who purported to check signatures did check signatures. That's the government's burden?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
Why do you
absolutely.
think that?
that's just how it's supposed to
Okay,
be.
if that's the case, then why don't you doubt the 2016 election when the government didn't make its case? It's affirmative
because
case.
there wasn't a concerted effort
What
to
concerted
deny people of their lawful speech regarding the results of the 2016 election. In 2020, you were not allowed to say that the election was rigged. Even though there's a history of Democratic operatives like Stacey Abrams, Karine Jean-Pierre, even the House Minority Leader, literally rejecting the results of multiple elections prior to 2020.
Is the government
They were
allowed
never
to
censored,
stop?
But myself was.
Yeah, is the government allowed to stop Facebook or Twitter from censoring a person for spreading misinformation, what they consider to be misinformation? Can the
Doesn't
government
matter.
stop?
They pushed,
the government stop
they
it?
pushed. Well, they seemingly did because they petitioned YouTube or Google and other giant media platforms to censor lawful speech.
So I asked a question.
Yes, they did.
Does the government have the authority to regulate speech on these platforms?
I would say yeah.
Why do you think that?
Okay, you know what? Well, let me rephrase that. Whether they have the authority or not doesn't really matter because they do it.
Well,
they did it. So why does that matter?
When you say
How is
they,
that germane to what we're talking
when you
about?
say
Because
they,
people were
they
censored.
did it
Were people censored? Yes or no? Was lawful speech censored? Yes or no?
under the First Amendment doctrines, no, it was not.
Oh, Jesus Christ, dude. Okay.
Do you agree with that or no?
No, I don't agree with that.
You don't agree that the First Amendment was not violated?
I believe it was violated. People's constitutional rights were violated.
Do you believe you have a
Censorship of
constitutional
lawful
right?
speech, petitioning corporations to censor people's lawful speech is bullshit. And yes, I do believe it is a violation of our rights.
Okay, so do you think that you have a constitutional right to post whatever you want on Facebook?
I never said that.
Okay, do you or do you not? Because if you don't have a constitutional right, then how could your constitutional right be violated if they censor you?
Well, saying that the election is rigged should be permissible.
Whether you think it should be permissible or not, the question is as follows. The question is as follows.
Pornography,
do you have a constitutional right? Wait, do you agree that pornography is constitutionally protected under current First Amendment doctrine?
It depends on what context.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be obscenity, but most pornography is not obscenity under the First Amendment doctrine that currently exists.
You sure about that?
Yes, I'm sure about that.
All right.
Do you disagree with that? There's a case called Miller. Okay, so do you agree that at least some pornography is protected by the First Amendment?
Yeah, perhaps some.
Okay, so do you or do you not agree that you have a constitutional right to post whatever you want on Facebook?
Well, when we put it that way, perhaps not.
Okay.
However,
so then how was Facebook violating your constitutional rights by taking stuff it doesn't want on there? Taking down that stuff.
I mean, look, this is an interesting philosophical conundrum.
Philosophical? It's a contradiction in what you're saying. It's a legal contradiction. You're saying that the First Amendment was violated.
There was an unequal application of all these rules.
Unequal or unequal?
Unequal.
Okay.
Unequal. That is certainly true. Democrats were allowed to reject the results of any election that they wanted, and they faced zero repercussions. But people who also engaged in this in similar lawful speech at the behest of the government, they were censored.
What's your citation
from
for
these
that?
platforms?
How do you know
that again?
So the government, you think, because they, in your words, pressured social media companies to take down certain content.
The Twitter files, dude.
That makes you, yeah. I mean that bullshit shit. Because
inconvenient, isn't it?
Well, it's not inconvenient at all. It disproves your case. In fact,
no, not necessarily.
Yeah, it does because
the government intervened in people's lawful speech.
How did the government? I totally disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, by censoring their speech.
The government didn't make that decision. The social media.
Well, I'm a free speech absolutist. So again, we're just gonna have to fundamentally disagree on this point.
Okay, so you're a free speech absolutist. Do you think you have a right to post whatever you want on Twitter or not?
No.
No. Okay.
No, not at all.
So then a decision by Twitter to take down your content, absent coercion from the government, how could that implicate some First Amendment interest?
It's a town square, dude. It's a public town square.
If it's a traditional public forum,
as a utility.
Okay.
The only reason why the majority of these companies exist is because of the public's paying into taxes, right? The internet is, in my estimation, a public utility, and it should be treated as such. And lawful speech was never, ever, under any of these circumstances, censored the way that we saw after 2020 and during 2020.
If it's a public utility, if it's a traditional public forum, or if it's, I don't know, a designated public forum, then why don't you have a right to say whatever you want on those platforms?
Well, because there are laws. For example, I'm not allowed to make credible threats of violence. I am against such things.
Yeah, but we're talking about lawful speech. Why are you assuming that the speech is by itself lawful? I don't doubt that questioning the results of the election is lawful speech and under the First Amendment, 100%.
Okay.
But if it's the case that it's your belief that these are town squares, another word for that is a traditional public forum. A traditional public forum is a place where you cannot restrict on the basis of content your speech. That is almost by definition unconstitutional. So why isn't it then your position that on Twitter, on Facebook, you have a right to post whatever you want up to the constitutional limit?
Well, there are still meaningful rules that, that are afforded to, or wait, hold on. Let me back up. There are still liberties that are afforded to these platforms to censor certain speech that most of us will find reprehensible,
Woo!
like using
Beautiful.
racial
I couldn't have
slurs,
said
for
it better
example.
myself. Let's move on then.
Yeah, so like using racial slurs, for example.
Oh.
Like that's not something that
Wait,
I do. It's
isn't
not something that I would
aren't racial slurs protected speech under the First Amendment?
Sure, but you can also make the argument
Okay.
that sometimes engaging in that speech would silence somebody else's speech for one reason or another.
Not under the First
But that's
Amendment. Wait,
besides the point.
you think that the government, if it wanted to, could make it illegal to say a racial slur?
If it wanted to, yeah.
That sounds pretty SJW of you, bro. You think the government can tell you can't
I'm
say
not
the
getting-
N-word?
Well, I'm just saying, I don't agree that that's what the government should do, but I'm just saying if they
You
wanted
think they're
to do
legally
such a
allowed
thing.
to do that? That if they want to be like, no more.
It doesn't matter what they're legally allowed to do.
It actually does
They
matter what they're
engage in
legally
this-
allowed to do.
They engage in activity that runs antithetical to the
I don't even know who you're
spirit
talking
of
about.
free
They
speech.
is. I mean, you're saying that you
The
think
regime, dude, the government.
the regime. Okay,
The
who,
permanent government.
who was in charge of the government in 2020?
President Trump, presumably.
Okay.
But that didn't really seem to be the case. There were
It
elements
didn't
of his
seem to be the
government
case?
no, not necessarily. He made decisions that were actively ignored by members of his military and of his administration.
Okay. So recentering us, I guess, on
let's
the
recenter
fundamental
us.
claim. So you point to the Twitter files and this relationship between government, I don't know, agents and censorship regimes on these social media platforms, and that's the basis in your mind to doubt the 2020 election results without any additional proof of malfeasance in the actual conduction of the election.
Well, that's certainly one point of contention. If you don't allow the citizenry to speak openly on the primary modes of communication, that's a huge problem to me.
Are you
It's
aware
a
of
really big problem?
So how did you get access to a lot of these claims about election fraud if not through social media?
Well, some claims were able to go through. However, there was still a concerted effort to censor the majority of the speech.
Do you
I mean,
believe
you're-
that this was the election with the most oversight and the most eyes looking at what was being done, the number of voters, the amount of ballots? Don't you think that this election had the most independent eyes on them? We're talking about Republican governors. We're talking about Trump attorneys themselves. We're talking about Trump poll watchers. Isn't it the case that this election had the most independent oversight of any election in recent history?
No.
Which
In
election can
Detroit-
you point to that had more oversight than this election?
I don't know any of them, but
Any of them.
to suggest that this was like the most, on the level election is just categorically
That's
false.
not what I
mean,
asked. I asked, is this the election with the most scrutiny on both the conduct of the election and the people administering it?
Scrutiny, yeah.
Okay.
People administering it, maybe, but
So
I mean,
why was it the case that Trump has been unable, and you, by the way, to produce actual evidence of fraud? You can poke at the margins if you want and say, hey, I had to wait in line a little long, and I didn't like that Zuckerberg censored my speech. But let's get to the hard brass tacks. Why has Trump, his attorneys, and you been unable to produce hard evidence of voter fraud or irregularities?
there are plenty of people who have been able to produce irregularities and fraudulent behavior
Enough to swing the election?
Yeah, certainly.
What is that
even
proof?
If it wasn't, even if it wasn't enough to sway the election, the fact that there are so many irregularities in the swing states and there's zero transparency. Again, this is the heart of the issue: is that there's zero transparency in this process, and there were zero meaningful audits conducted, except for Arizona, which did find many, many problems. I mean, for goodness sakes, I mean, there's videos of people harvesting ballots, and one individual is signing multiple ballots and then dropping it off in a Dropbox. And there's, again, no criminal investigation.
Okay.
There's
Are
no meaningful audit.
Where
of
do
that
you
specific
allege that this
Dropbox.
took place? The one person on video signing multiple ballots. Where do you allege this took place?
Georgia, Wisconsin, PA, doesn't matter, man.
It doesn't
The
matter
fact
where
of the
this took
matter
place.
is- the fact of the matter is that there is zero transparency. You're the one that made the claim that there were audits everywhere. That is not
I didn't
true.
say I
They
didn't
say-
say I didn't say everywhere. In the swing states that were most
That's
contested,
not true.
under first
Besides
of all,
Arizona, where?
first
Besides Arizona, where?
so in Georgia there were audits. You
No, there
disagree?
weren't.
Do you deny that?
Yes,
Okay, so that's a fact we can determine, can't we?
sure.
So if I come with evidence that there were audits in Georgia, what would you say in response to that?
Well, let me see the evidence.
Okay.
Oh my
This
goodness.
is from Georgia, the Georgia Secretary of State, who you might know as Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah, Brad Raffensperger. Yeah, untrustworthy individual for sure.
Okay, so if he says that there was a risk audit, a risk limiting audit of all counties, what would that make you?
It's a risk limiting audit. What does that even mean?
So
Did they compare and contrast the voter rolls with the ballots on hand?
they compared and examined 41,881 batches, hand sorted and counted each ballot as part of the process, which was the largest hand count of ballots in United States history.
Hand counts aren't audits.
Can you say more about that? So you want to look at the signatures?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, do you dispute the fact that there were quite a few ballots that had addresses that were the UPS, that were FedEx, that were vacant lots? Because
the burden of proof is on you to A, show those ballots, and B, show that there's anything wrong about them. Wait,
I didn't have time to prepare.
Okay, so you're just saying things that you have no awareness of.
No, I am aware of it. And for those listening, you can do your own independent research yourself, and you will find that to be the case. There were quite a few ballots that had information that would disqualify it from being counted. And again, if that wasn't the case, why were there not meaningful, transparent audits conducted in all of these states, save for Arizona?
So would you agree in Arizona, the election was conducted fairly?
No.
Why not? But there was a audit that met your specifications.
Yeah, they did. And there was no remedy.
Remedy for what? You said that the audit was conducted correctly.
Yeah,
the audit found that Biden won the election.
The audit was conducted by an independent group, and
is it the case that wait? Stop.
And the government did nothing about it.
Is it the case? Is it the case that the audit in Arizona found that Biden won the election?
No.
You don't believe that the Cyber Ninjas audit found that Biden won the most amount of votes?
No, not really.
Are you sure or are you not sure that the audit from Cyber Ninjas confirmed Biden's victory?
I don't think that's what it confirmed.
Are you sure or are you not sure about what the audit results were? If you're sure about it, say you're sure. If you're not sure, it's fine. You can say you're not sure. There's nothing wrong with that, other than you spouting
sure the election
misinformation.
Was bullshit.
Oh, okay,
sure
that's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking whether you think it's bullshit. I'm asking, are you aware or are you not aware of the results of the audit?
I am aware of the results of
what
the audit.
What are the results of the Cyber Ninjas audit?
Yeah, that there were a lot of irregularities.
I'm sorry.
The ballots,
who was the victor under the Cyber Ninjas audit?
If you were to take what was provided by the state, because it was highly limited in scope.
I asked you a question.
Which is a restriction
I asked you a
by
question.
Arizona.
What did I ask you? Are you aware of what I just asked you?
Yeah.
What did I ask you?
I was answering it and you interrupted me.
No, you weren't answering it. I asked you who was the victor under the Cyber Ninjas audit.
Well, unfortunately, it would be Biden. But again, that doesn't dispute the claim that there were massive irregularities and that the government should have acted to conduct a meaningful audit themselves. And
you said it was a meaningful audit. You can't say, therefore, they should have audited again. You said it was sufficient.
But the Cyber Ninjas do not yield any power whatsoever in the state of Arizona. They were granted access to
the Cyber Ninjas found, as you just said, that Biden won the election.
With what they were provided, sure, but there were still.
You yourself said it was a meaningful audit. You said it was sufficient.
Why are you disputing this? Why are you disputing this?
I'm sorry, you're the one disputing the Arizona results, aren't you?
Yeah, but you're completely rejecting the claim that there were a handful of ballots that had severe irregularities. When you have so many ballots with incorrect, invalid signatures, and the state does nothing. I mean, we're talking about thousands of ballots here with invalid signatures. That is a problem. The state should act to remedy that situation immediately. Again, that isn't in the spirit of open inquiry and transparency.
So the Cyber Ninjas found that the victor of the election was Joe Biden. You're saying now that they found that a bunch of signatures on ballots were invalid. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Citation needed.
I didn't have time to prepare. You wanted to jump into this. And again, I'm just making the case that there was zero transparency throughout this process.
They didn't find that those thousands were invalid ballots. That's just not true.
Well,
I don't know who it is actually true.
No,
the Gateway Pundit article, I just linked it.
Quote it.
In politics.
Quote it.
It's in politics in the Discord.
Quote it. I thought these dipshits weren't going to come in, but I guess when you're on the ropes, they're allowed to come in.
I'm just listening in, but I'm gonna drop off. I'm just gonna say, as an Arizona resident, do your research.
Yeah, you don't know shit either. I mean, if you want, we can arrange if you want, we can
I would
arrange a
love to,
conversation.
man.
You being in that state isn't a source of information for you. You're not like smarter because you live in the state if you're repeating these bullshit conspiracy theories.
Hey, let me just ask you one
what's a
question that I'll drop off.
conspiracy, dude? What is wait, what's a conspiracy here?
The conspiracy is that Zuckerberg and others orchestrated the defeat of Donald Trump. That,
Yes,
you know,
they did.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You have no proof of that, right?
So let me just ask the question really quick because you've been asking a lot of questions, Pisco.
Yeah, give me.
Is it okay that cyber ninjas, which they were subpoenaed, they had all the records given in front of the court, that's okay, but when you try to get information from Runbeck, who runs our elections out here in Maricopa County, but the judge rules, oh no, they're not subject to oversight. Do you think that's rules for me and not for thee?
So
Especially when Runbeck is the one that's printing the ballots, that it's a chain of custody where all that's going through is Runbeck. It goes to Runbeck from USPS, and then it goes to the county at MC Tech. Do you think there's an issue if there is no accountability, there is no oversight of Runbeck?
not unless that you can show that the issues in Runbeck were substantiated.
But they're a government. They're working for the government. You're telling me that someone working for the government should not have any oversight?
I don't think that it's
Is it yes or no?
necessary for.
It's a yes or no, as you say. It's a yes or no.
Hang on a second. So an organization that works for the government, of course, is subject to oversight by the government. Who else?
Okay, so why didn't that happen?
It's your allegation that there was no sufficient oversight.
It's not an allegation. It's literally in the court documents.
Okay, so a subpoena,
go
a subpoena was issued by whom to whom?
And this has been a minute, so I'm trying to remember.
A subpoena was issued by whom to whom?
Subpoena for the records?
Yeah. What records are you saying were improperly withheld?
They were trying to get information on Runbeck. That I'll have to pull the parties suing. So I want to say it was Kerry Lake or
okay. Now we have an issue, don't we? If it's Kerry Lake, do you think that every individual in the United States should have the ability to get a government to produce anything they want all the time?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's your standard. That's your new FOIA standard. Anyone who claims an injury can get anything they want all the time.
Well, yes. Technically, the people of Arizona were injured if the election was proven fraudulent or there was election maladministration, which was alleged by Kerry's team on Maricopa County. I forget exactly where all that went.
So what information specifically was Cyber Ninjas denied? Is that your allegation that they were denied information?
We're talking two different things.
Okay,
here, I think.
Were Cyber Ninjas denied information?
Yes.
No, Cyber Ninjas was subpoenaed for information for, I want to say, phone records. There was a lawsuit. I can't remember the exact lawsuit, but there was a lawsuit.
You're asking me, so just be clear, you're asking me to compare the standards for subpoenas, and you cannot even identify the people requesting subpoenas for either Cyber Ninjas or Kerry Lake lawsuit.
I will look it up here. So American Oversight has finalized a settlement agreement with the Arizona Senate and Cyber Ninjas in a public records in a public records lawsuit that spanned nearly 2 years and extracted thousands of pages of public records related to the Senate's audit of the 2020 election results. So all I'm trying to make the point here, man, is it's everyone plays by the same book, or
no, that sounds like a settlement.
We have issues.
That sounds like a settlement, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound like a settlement?
Well, so here, I guess.
Sorry, does it not sound like a settlement? What you just described.
There was a lawsuit, yes,
okay.
But I'm telling you,
what did I just ask you?
There was a settlement between the two parties that were
what is
sued.
A settlement?
Yes.
What is a settlement?
You can look it up. It's on AmericanOversight.org.
No, sorry. What is a settlement? Generally, what is a settlement?
Financial or other means. I'm assuming.
Financial or other means. What are you talking about? Are you an idiot? A settlement is a contract. A contract.
What happened to being a gentleman?
Because you guys, hang on a second. You guys are morons, and you're just like repeating articles without having the slightest comprehension of what's in them or what the processes are entailed. Hang on, I'm gonna explain to you. So a settlement is a contract, right? You understand a contract? A contract is an agreement, a meeting of the minds between two parties where they agree on the underlying terms of what to produce, what not to produce. It's a freely entered into agreement, and you're trying to say that that agreement should be compared to a compulsory process that is like a subpoena.
Well, was it? Like I said, it's been a minute since
Yeah,
the
so you don't
lawsuit.
have-
I'm
yeah, you don't know shit. If you don't know shit, you don't know shit. That's cool. But then don't come at me with your, half-baked ideas before you're ready to come to play.
Dude. All I'm trying to tell you.
Spencer, please, can you move
Yep.
really quick? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, okay, let's rope this back in. I asked, what other meaningful audit was conducted outside of Arizona?
No, we're focused.
You have not
I'm
been
not
able
going
to
to
answer
concede.
that.
I'm not going to concede Arizona. Sorry. I'm not going to move past Arizona. If in Arizona there was, by all accounts, by your account, an audit that matched your requirement for being sufficiently thorough,
Yes,
then
but
hang on.
nothing
Then,
came about it.
Then
though, when there was fraud discovered,
because
that is
the
a
result was,
massive
hang on,
problem.
nothing came about
And
it.
you're getting
because
upset and you're engaging in ad homs.
Nothing
calling
came
people
about
names.
it. Nothing came
You
about it.
promised you'd be a gentleman.
Nothing came about it because the Arizona audit found that Biden won. Why would anything
Allegedly.
Okay.
No.
If that's what the audit found,
once you separate the ballots
No.
from the envelopes, then it is.
I don't even know what that means. Once you separate the ballots from
Yes.
the envelopes.
Okay. So I can actually explain the signature
Yeah.
verification process because I have actually some friends that reported on this. So here we go. And again, you can look at in the Watch Frogs Discord. You can look in politics. There's a link to a Gateway Pundit article where my buddy Jordan Conradson found that as they did their news gathering on this to do their story, which is completely legal under state law for them to produce this stuff. They showed
Stop yapping. I don't care.
They
if it's legal.
they showed the mismatch on signatures on the ballot envelope. So when you remove the ballot from the ballot envelope, if that signature was unlawfully approved by the signature guys that were just going like this, like they were playing slots, just pressing the button, do you think that is a problem?
Do you believe ballots and signatures should be separated?
They are separated from the envelopes.
Do you believe they should be?
Yes, they are separated once the signature is verified.
Okay. So once the signature is verified and they're separated.
And I say verified, I say in air quotes, because we clearly showed through this reporting that there were votes that went through that shouldn't have been. So they were unlawfully counted votes because of mismatching signatures.
So just to be 100% clear, you have produced a pundit article that claims that these signatures are mismatching or somehow
and they were unlawfully approved.
Pundit is completely valid according to NewsGuard, man. Don't disregard them because it's
super valid.
To what you believe.
You're people with a stake in the race. Yeah, no bullshit.
What's my stake?
So just to
be
1,000% clear.
Please, you're telling me Angie about making claims. What's my stake?
Just to be your stake is you wanted Trump to win, right?
I mean, it sounds like you wanted Biden to win.
I wanted the right result to be counted.
Oh, same here.
Well, no,
why can't we all agree on election integrity? Why don't we want election integrity?
You guys believe.
So why not have the same rules for everyone?
So I just be clear, the rules are the same for everyone in the state. Fair?
Not between Rumbeck and Cyber Ninjas. No, they're treated differently by the judge. In that case,
didn't you just get owned on that point and you admitted that you have no idea about the relevant processes in those cases? Didn't you just admit that?
There was a lawsuit. I'm not going to get in. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into specifics.
Right? So how can you make a claim
I took a semester of law, and all I need to know is constitutional rights and how to get out of speeding tickets. All right? That's all I learned about that.
What's the constitutional issue at stake and the difference in how the Cyber Ninjas and Runback were treated vis-a-vis subpoenas?
I'm saying it as just a general statement here.
Yeah, because
I'm not going to dive in. I'm not going to dive into the weeds with you because you actually.
It's a general statement because you're a dumbass.
I'm a dumbass.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a dumbass. Okay.
Yeah.
So the guy that actually witnessed people getting out of line in Arizona because the line was too long and voters were disenfranchised.
Cry more.
Spencer, stop. That's enough.
Okay.
So now you're being dismissive of legitimate claims of voter disenfranchisement. And again, this is the heart of the issue here because you're dismissing the grievances that these people have, and you're completely content with the way that the election transpired. I'm not.
That's
false. For Susan Spalding by any chance?
That's false. I thought we were gonna shut down the idiot. I mean, he's still piping
Spencer,
up.
Can you stop, please?
Yeah.
Spencer,
yeah. I'll jump out.
Yeah. Unmutes the next second later. Shut the fuck up. You've been owned. You can move on. All right.
You know what,
Calls
Pisco?
for-
I wish you the best, man.
yeah.
And you seem like a fearless
Pisco,
sister to
why
me.
are you so hostile, man? The
Because
viewers
he's a
wanna know, why are
dumbass.
you
He's
so
a dumbass,
angry?
and he's interrupting us when we're having a conversation. And I
Okay,
thought he
well,
wasn't going to pipe up. You asked him to. He's being disrespectful to you.
Fair enough.
Okay.
He means no harm. Does
Okay.
it hurt to be this stupid? Both of you. No, I'm not stupid, and neither is Spencer. Again, there are, like I said, there's grave issues with the way that these elections are conducted, and there is an issue of transparency, which you have not adequately, addressed, and you've been dismissive of people's grievances regarding the
Yeah.
process.
How have I
and
not
being
adequately
disenfraged.
addressed the issues of transparency?
Because I asked
wait,
you,
I
outside
want to
of
finish what I'm
Arizona,
saying.
where has
So-
there been
so-
a meaningful
so,
audit conducted? The fact
do you
that there
understand
hasn't
why
been
I'm
meaningful
staying?
audits
Do
conducted
you understand?
is a problem.
Do you understand why I'm staying in Arizona? Why do you think?
Because
I'm
it's
staying there?
convenient for you.
No, because
it's convenient for you.
It's the case.
And when there is information that runs contrary to your ethos, like the Gateway Pundit being a legitimate source, which it is according to NewsGuard, you get dismissive and huff and puff.
So
I mean,
the
you're getting
reason
upset.
I'm staying,
I'm not upset. I'm
the
having a
reason I'm
conversation.
staying in Arizona is because this is the state which had the most extensive audits. And the point of staying here is if even the most extensive audits did not satisfy you, then every other response on the
Yeah,
other
but
states
you-
is going to
okay,
be
but what you're-
overdetermined. Do you understand
okay,
that?
But you're omitting the part where I said, yes, there were audits. Not good ones, but there were audits.
Hang on.
And they found irregularities, very grave, serious problems with the election that, in my opinion, puts it in doubt.
Okay, so
And it needs to be remedied, and it hasn't.
how would you remedy the grave problems in Arizona?
Get the ballots, publish
What?
them, so people
Publish
can scrutinize
the
them,
ballots.
and have people be able to compare and contrast with the voter rolls. And there's no desire to do that on the modern left. The modern left's response to people claiming that the election is bullshit is to censor their lawful speech. And
Yeah, I'm not
to
interested in that.
cock
Don't worry
block
about that.
and-
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah, and
I
to
don't.
cock
I
block
really don't care
any
about your First Amendment
meaningful
arguments.
move to audit.
Yeah,
these
you're
ballots.
just talking to no one. No one here cares about your First Amendment claims. We're focusing on the election. So if you want to
Okay.
bring your claims about unfairness and your grievances
Yeah,
and,
but that's a
and
part of it.
how you
It's
feel,
chilling
you
people's
feel
speech.
like the victim. I understand you feel like the victim,
We
and you
are victims.
yeah, you are victims. You feel very bad that you're the victims and you've had grievances. We're not focused on your First Amendment shit. It's all bullshit anyway, but we're not getting
No,
into
it's
that.
not.
It is bullshit.
fundamental
but,
right.
I mean, it's a fundamental right to post on Twitter.
Yeah, Elon
Yes,
Musk seems
okay.
to share that opinion.
Apparently not, because he's banning people who like talk shit about him.
Well, I don't know about all that.
Yeah, of course you don't. Yeah, you don't know anything that absolutely destroys and undermines your point. You don't know anything
Well,
about that.
You know, likewise, because you were crying about the Gateway Pundit. I mean, come
The
on,
gate-
man. Now you're being silly. You're being
so
silly.
so you think that I'm unwilling to deal with like facts, quote unquote facts that go counter to my narrative? That's what this whole thing has been about. We're examining a specific state that you've said where there's been a sufficient audit. Is this a sufficient audit?
For
Arizona. Sufficient or
No,
not?
I don't believe so.
Why was
No.
this audit insufficient?
It was insufficient because of the scope. It was insufficient because there were irregularities found, which you don't even admit to.
Wait,
You can't even admit that there were problems.
No,
with
I
ballots
deny-
and there
I-
were problems with signatures.
I deny that.
Okay, do you agree
yeah,
that
I
there were
deny that.
problems with signatures on
I-
some of the ballots?
I deny that that's been proven. I deny it. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're
Okay,
talking about
then-
is the
then
nature
I
of
don't
the.
know what to tell you, man.
Wait.
I don't know what to tell you.
I deny that you have proven that there were problems with the ballots. I deny that. I think that has not at all been established. But to
Okay,
be
man.
clear, I'm not talking
I
about.
don't know what to tell
I'm
you,
not
man.
talking about I'm not talking about like the ultimate disposition. I'm saying that the nature of the audit was the audit itself a process that you trusted, that you trust.
Not entirely, but it highlighted and showed enough problems, enough issues with the way that the election unfolded to warrant concern, to warrant calls for the state of Arizona to get off its ass and to appease the voters and to address their legitimate grievances, which you've been huffing and puffing
So
about
you
and scoffing at
Don't
and
trust
dismissing.
the results of the Cyber Ninjas audit.
That's not what I said, man.
Do you or
That's
do you
what I
not
said
trust
at
it?
all.
Do you or do you not trust it?
That's not what I said.
Do you trust it or do you not trust it?
I trust what the Cyber Ninjas produced.
Okay. And so is it your claim that the Cyber Ninjas produced evidence of fraud?
Yes, they did.
What evidence
Adequate
of fraud did they
And I told you,
produce?
which you disagree with. So, I mean, we're just butting heads here.
Wait.
Yes, there were issues. There's images of it, man. Dr. Shiva.
What is
ended up
the issue?
producing it.
Explain the issue.
Dude, okay, this is like the 5th time I
Yeah,
had to explain
explain it.
this. Okay, so there were ballots
Mhm.
where an individual voter was supposed to sign, and there was no signature there. There were stamps that said approved, or there was one line through it. That is not a legitimate signature.
How many
or
ballots
a name was printed.
are you alleging where there were, or I don't know, mail?
I do not have
where
the
there weren't
literature in
signatures?
front of me. I don't have the materials in front of me. Again, I was not able to prepare for this, but it did happen. There were irregularities and there were issues with the ballots. And again, the state doesn't care.
Are you able to
when there is an
describe?
issue with it.
So the issues you've identified so far, as I can recount them, are some ballots did not have any signatures, or some envelopes did not have signatures. Fair?
Plenty of them, yes.
So you don't have any idea of how many that is.
Not at the top of my head, no.
Is it enough to change the outcome of the election in your mind?
It's possible, yes. As a matter of
Are
fact,
you
it's very
sure
likely.
or
If
not?
you were to expand the scope of a genuine audit, I don't believe that Joe Biden would have won that contest.
No,
full
I don't
stop.
care about your beliefs right now. I care about the evidence that you're able to produce. And you're unable
Okay.
at this moment to give any kind of approximation of the number of envelopes or signatures that were absent. Fair? You don't know how
Sure,
many those
fair.
are.
No, not like I said, not at the top of my head, no.
Okay, so then
Alright,
why do you think that is evidence of sufficient evidence to question the results if you don't have any idea of the magnitude?
Well, because nobody does.
How wait,
Irregularities are found, issues are found with the votes, and the government is saying enough. We're not going to examine this any further. We're going to cock block the process, and we're going to deny people of their legitimate grievances.
okay.
That's again, dude, this is me and you just ideologically fundamentally disagree on this matter. So we need to let's. We're not going to agree, dude. Again,
Yeah, so
you're honed in on-
you're
honed
coming
in
into
on one
this.
state. You're honed in on one state, and you don't want to address the fact that there were no other meaningful audits conducted anywhere else.
So
in the
the
swing states at
reason
the very
why
least.
I'm focused on Arizona is because even here you have a clear case where there's been extensive audits done, where the state legislature has contracted a organization that's incredibly pro-Trump, and in their final result, they absolutely confirmed the Biden victory. And what you're able to point to is a kind of vague notion that some signatures were invalid, but without any specifics.
Again, dude, I wasn't allowed to prepare for this. And you're asking for very, very specific details that I didn't have time to get. I mean, dude, we're talking about multiple swing states. And again, I don't have the literature in front of me.
You're an expert.
And I said formerly, dude.
You're
I
not
don't
currently
do elections anymore.
Are you currently an expert in how elections are conducted?
I don't think anybody is an expert in the way the elections are conducted as of 2020
okay,
because the
there are
entire
no election
process
experts?
has been overhauled and changed dramatically to introduce
So
mail-in
if
ballots.
no one is an election expert, you would concede you're not an election expert. Fair?
I never said that I was.
You
I
is
never
it your
said
position
that I was.
that
Now
is it
you're
your
attributing
position?
words to me that I didn't
Is it
make.
your position that you never said that you were an election expert?
Yeah, I didn't say that.
Okay. Do you understand that there's a tweet to that effect, right?
Yeah, pull it up.
Yeah, sure.
Read it verbatim, if you will.
100%. Ba ba ba.
Let's see. Kiyoshi-ku? No, I'm not. No. First off, he's not even addressing the core complaints that I'm making.
What's the core complaint you're making?
That there's zero transparency and
But-
that there were
but
no meaningful audits
Isn't an
conducted
audit
anywhere.
a transparency? Do you believe in Arizona there was transparency? Fair?
Yes and no. It's more
How was
complex than
there-
a simple yes
How
or no
was there
answer.
no was there sufficient transparency in Arizona?
I already explained the scope of these audits were incredibly limited.
Well,
And
okay.
even when there were irregularities discovered, the state did absolutely nothing to remedy the problem.
I'm sorry. I'm only focused on transparency. Fair? I'm only asking about transparency.
Okay.
Was there sufficient transparency in
No.
Arizona? Okay.
No.
So then where was there any place that had sufficient transparency in the 2020 election?
Regarding the swing states that we mentioned earlier, no.
Okay.
I do not believe so.
This is a quote of your tweet. Quote, "I'm a former expert on
yeah,
election
that's
matters."
not a current expert, which is what you were suggesting or alluding
okay.
to.
So
former.
when you say former,
I've
when
made
were
plenty of comments that I do not do this
when did
anymore.
you stop being an expert on election matters?
I'd say probably around 2015.
So how old are you?
33.
33. So 2015 would have been what, 8 or 9 years ago?
Dude, I don't know. No, bro.
So
One day.
You stopped being an election expert in 2015 before the 2016 election? You lost your expertise?
I changed career paths. And again, the entire process has been overhauled. Can we agree that the way voting is conducted in America dramatically changed in 2020? Yes or no?
In some ways, yeah.
In some ways, yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean,
So
it's not
territory.
So some states such as Pennsylvania, and this is to go back to your initial point where you're like the governors did fucking things unilaterally, whatever. You had an expansion of mail-in ballots, but just to be clear, in Pennsylvania specifically, that was a bipartisan piece of legislature passed prior to COVID in 2019, overwhelmingly approved by the legislature, signed by the Democratic governor, and so a lot of these cases aren't what you say.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
So, for example, you allege that there was problems in terms of the separation of powers with respect to who was making changes to how the election was conducted. But I gave you an example in Pennsylvania where the broad expansion of mail-in ballots was a bipartisan piece of legislation called Act 77. Are you aware of that?
Say that one more time.
Okay.
Say that one more time.
Are you trolling me?
No.
Did you or did you not say at the start that it had to be the legislatures to approve massive changes to how the election was conducted?
Yeah.
What I'm providing you is one example in Pennsylvania where the massive change, that is expanding mail-in ballots to everybody in Pennsylvania, was a bipartisan piece of legislature called Act 77 that was put into law on a bipartisan fashion in 2019. Prior to COVID.
Yes or no? Did that run contrary to the state's constitution?
According to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, no.
Oh, okay.
Wait, do you agree with that or not?
No.
The
Supreme Court is partisan.
The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is partisan.
Yeah.
So you think that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is the ultimate say on what Pennsylvania law means, you don't accept their holding?
No, it's bullshit.
Okay.
Don't agree. Voting
Why?
should be conducted in person.
Wait. You understand that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court undertakes a legal analysis. It's not about your policy preference. So
No,
on what basis do you think the Pennsylvania Supreme Court came to the wrong decision?
Because the decision appears to have run contrary to the state's constitution.
Can you explain how?
Oh, man. Dude, do you really want me to go fishing for the state's constitution regarding how
I'm asking you why you disagree with it.
I'm telling you why. I explained why. And you
explained that the result is something you don't agree with. That's conclusory. It's the conclusion. I want to know the reasoning.
Well, as I mentioned many times earlier, there was no transparency in this process, and nobody is able to independently verify.
Okay, you understand we moved on to the constitutional issue in Pennsylvania, and it's not about transparency. It's about a law and its facial compliance with the state constitution.
Because you were saying that they passed this law, the legislature passed this law, and I made the claim accurately that it ran contrary to the Constitution. And then
I asked how.
Pennsylvania Supreme Court. How? Because it wasn't supposed to be mass mail-in ballots, dude. Those mass mail-in ballots are not secure. They're not safe. There's no oversight. There's no way to verify the validity of these ballots. And in many such cases, there wasn't even, anybody verifying the signatures of these documents.
In Pennsylvania?
In all of the swing states. Yes.
Okay. You understand you're full of shit, right?
No, I'm not.
You understand that you're one of the dumbest people I've ever spoken with on this entire platform.
I sincerely doubt it.
I'm asserting it, and it's the case.
If you want to believe the regime-approved narrative regarding mail-in ballots and you want complete and total access to it, again, this is a fundamental disagreement about our beliefs and our ethos regarding how voting is conducted.
You can keep using words like ethos and fundamental and all these filler words that make you think that you're smart. You're one of the dumber persons I've ever spoken with.
Dude, I mean, again, you're upset and you're getting animated and huffing and puffing and engaging in ad-hom attacks because your ideology really runs contrary to core principles regarding transparency.
Core principles, man, and it's not transparent, and it violates it because it does, and no one audited it, and no one looked at it. You sound like a idiot. You haven't done your homework. You haven't done your research. You don't know the first thing about how the election was conducted. You have no ability to distinguish it from the 2016 election other than your vibes. You started this conversation by saying, I
Not
assert
accurate.
that the Jill Stein litigation was pressed by Hillary Clinton, said, I know I don't have proof on
it
it, but I
probably
believe
was.
it anyway.
Yes.
And
I'm
then,
almost
and
certain
you're
that
on
it
it, and you
Yeah.
said the Jews may have controlled all this, but you're not sure.
I never said that. No. You brought up the J.
Sorry,
word.
you
I
said that you're
didn't.
not sure.
You wanted to.
Wait, are you sure?
Because you're asking me to answer a question
Yeah.
that I don't know anything about.
Do you have a
I don't
reason?
know why you would. First of all, I don't know
Yeah.
why you would say that. Like, from my understanding, you're a leftist, so you're probably, you probably have a worldview that's antithetical to Israel, given everything that's happening in the
No.
Middle East right now, and that's probably
I
why
love
you're invoking
Israel.
it. I don't know if you're anti-Semitic. I don't know why you're bringing
No,
them
no,
up.
because
I didn't bring them up. You did.
listen,
I'm not trying to
I
get
think
banned
you're
here
I think you're kind
or
of
get accused of
sketchy. I
anti-Semitism.
think you're kind of sketchy here about who you think is responsible. You think someone is responsible for stealing the election from Donald Trump. That's correct, isn't it?
Someone or something, sure.
So who do you believe is responsible for stealing the election from Donald Trump?
Well, given the fact that the states are, these elections are independently conducted,
Are they?
there's probably a whole slew of different people that are involved.
So the Republicans in Georgia stole the election
Yes.
from. Okay.
Yes, Governor Kemp is likely involved. Brad Raffensperger, these individuals are adamantly anti-Trump. They're anti-transparency. They've been cock blocking people trying to get access to the ballots and meaningfully audit them. That is not in dispute, dude. That is 100% fact. Stacey Abrams, far leftist, somebody you would probably agree with, even she rejects outcomes of the election prior to
Do you agree with her?
I don't know.
Do you think that the election was stolen from
Maybe
Stacey?
she has a
Do you
point.
believe in
I'm-
2018 the election was stolen from Stacey Abrams? Yes or no?
I have no idea. Given the fact that there's transparency problems ongoing right now, maybe she has a point. I personally not a big fan of her. But
Yeah, you're going
if
off
she was
vibes. If you like
her
the
rights
person,
were
you believe them.
violated,
If you don't,
if
you
her
don't.
voters were disenfranchised, I believe that they have a right to have a meaningful audit conducted. If you want to conduct one right now and find some meaningful remedy for Stacey Abrams, I am all for it. But Stacey Abrams, Karine Jean-Pierre, Hillary Clinton, and a whole slew of other individuals, they are allowed to reject the outcome of any election that they want. But people like myself, when we say, hey, something is wrong, we get censored because the government is pressuring these tech companies to do it.
You're a
And you
crybaby.
wanna,
No one's censoring you right now. You're spewing your filth
I
on
didn't
Twitter.
say they're censoring me right now,
You're
but it
spewing
did
your
happen.
filth on Twitter. There was plenty of filth that was spewed by people like you believing bullshit from the Gateway Pundit and other bullshit sources. That's
They're
what
not bullshit,
That's
that's a
what you
lie.
did, and
Now you're
it
crying.
was all over social media, and you're crying and whining about election you lost. And even in the places where the audits and the transparency was the most open to the public, you're crying
Doubt.
on election issues you cannot even specify and elaborate on. It is pathetic. You have failed as an American citizen to make any articulable case for fraud. And you're spreading bullshit to all of your fans, however many they
Okay,
are.
so I should just throw my hands up and agree with the regime-approved narrative.
No one's
about
saying
how
that,
these
but
elections
the burden
transpired.
of proof is
And
on
by
you.
the way, the government should not be given the benefit of the doubt. Given everything that's transpired in the last, let's say, 30 years, I believe it is the most American thing to do, which is dispute claims made by the government until they produce evidence otherwise, and to demand transparency where none exists.
So
Again, we just fundamentally agree on this.
we fundamentally agree or
And-
disagree.
Disagree.
Yeah, so I agree that
That's
there
what I
should be
meant.
transparency, but I also
No, it
believe
doesn't seem like it.
but I
because
also
you're
believe
upset.
but I also believe that those who are alleging voter fraud have a burden of proof to prove
No, the
it.
government does.
No,
the government does.
So I'll bring you back to the start of our conversation, sir. Do you recall when we were talking about the 2016 election, and we were talking, and you said, wait, well, why don't you question the 2016 election? I offered you a standard, and that standard was, isn't the burden of proof on the person alleging fraud in the case of the 2016 election to prove it? And you said, yes, of course. And in fact, the reason you gave, one that I agreed with for why you trusted the 2016 election, was because there was not a sufficient meeting of the burden by those alleging fraud in 2016. However,
Correct.
in 2020, the burden has shifted, and you've now said that there's an affirmative obligation of the government to disprove voter fraud as opposed to the other way around. How is that
Yes,
not the
correct.
definition of a double standard?
Well, because when individual private citizens bring forth claims and they state that they have grievances, the government should address those grievances.
They have.
You appear to be antithetical to that.
Wait. They have. You don't accept it. When I try to bring up
No, they did not.
Sorry. When I try to bring up Raffensperger's response, you say you can't trust him. When I try to bring up Richter's response, you say I don't trust what he says.
Because there hasn't been meaningful audits conducted.
Those are the context.
Plain and simple.
Those are in the context of 2 states that had audits. And okay, put
No,
aside
they did-
put aside
Georgia did not have a
the
meaningful
Georgia
audit,
one. I
dude.
totally disagree with your characterization of it not being sufficient. Put aside
Fair enough.
Put aside the Georgia one. Just Arizona. You're not going to buy anything Stephen Richter says in response to every single one of your claims has a response.
I've already addressed that.
Yeah,
Okay,
you don't
we're
believe
obviously
him.
not gonna
You
agree.
don't. Wait. You just don't believe Stephen Richter. Fair.
No, absolutely not.
Okay,
No, he's not a
so
trustworthy
all right.
individual.
So then the government has responded to those claims. The truth is, you don't believe the response. Fair?
They responded to it by telling the voters, people with legitimate grievances, to f off in legalese, of course.
Shut the
And-
up. They told him.
Yeah,
They had.
yeah.
Do you want to know how many hearings Richter had, and how often these grievances were heard and responded to? How that there were investigations from state investigatory bodies, which I'm sure are into it, right? The Georgia investigation, the state police officers that investigated the election, they're all in on it. I'm sure you would believe the FBI's in on it too, correct? Because they investigated as well.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't
Again, I'm not
surprise you. It
making
wouldn't
that
surprise you.
claim.
So like your claim that somehow these were not aired is complete and utter horseshit. They were absolutely aired and responded to. You don't believe the response. That's the truth.